This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Ray's Movers and Self-Storage, offering storage solutions and all your moving needs. The Green Witch Juice Bar and Cafe for delicious, natural foods, smoothies, and juices. Well, with us today is who I consider a Renaissance man of our area, and it is Doug Ross. He is the former editorial editor, which was one of the longest running positions you held at the Times here in Northwest Indiana, among other things. He's award-winning. He's covered Northwest Indiana for more than 35 years, and it was with the Times for more than 25.
Actually, 30.
Really?
Actually.
Wow, that's amazing. Right. So tell our audience members a little bit about you, where you come from, how you got to this point in life.
Sure. So I grew up in Wabash, Indiana, which was a really great place for a kid to grow up. We did all kinds of things. You know, that was an area where there wasn't as much traffic as here. It was a town of maybe 13,000 or so. So, you know, we did things like learning how to drive on really steep hills, because they have steep hills that go down to the Wabash River. So my sister taught me how to drive a stick shift by saying, "You're going to stall out on the hill." Okay. Thanks, Pam. You know, and she says, "And you're going to have your friends with you." Okay, thanks, Pam. You know, I'm really feeling confident about this right now. So she says, "So what you do is you put the emergency brake on when it stalls, and then you pop the hood, get out, grab a wrench from under the seat. Doesn't matter what kind of wrench. Your friends won't know better anyway. Bang on the carburetor." It's like this big metal disc thing, you know. It actually houses the air filter, but, you know. And she said, "Swear at it a few times. Get back in the car. It's going to start right up. Your friends are going to think you're a great mechanic, and then you can just go on." And so, you know, I learned that from her. I learned from my brother Mike was the one that taught me that if you hit the first set of railroad tracks fast enough, you'll sail over the second, which is a little strange, but there was that. And then he was the one who taught me that if you don't go to study hall the first day of class, then the teacher won't know that you have to be there. So you've got an easy out to go be wherever you want during that period. So
that never fared well for me.
It worked for me, but you know, I was still in the school working on other things.
Neither did skipping detention, but we won't discuss that.
That's the interview for next week.
So a small town,
small town, yeah, and it was kind of nice. It was an era of the 70s, and so I'm growing up very interested in journalism. Honestly, as it turned out, I took journalism class as a freshman, and usually it's for sophomores. Right. So they ended up, for my senior year, they created a class called Journalism 4 for me. So I had 4 straight years of journalism for English credits.
Great.
So then I went from there to Indiana University in Bloomington, had a nice full ride for 2 years, thanks to the foundation, and thank you to the foundation. And so I went down there, did all kinds of fun things, and learned a lot. And then the scholarship ran out, so I moved up here to Northwest Indiana. Went to what at the time was Purdue North Central. It's Purdue Northwest now, and took a couple of classes to just kind of. I didn't want to lose momentum, and so I did that for a year. I was working, and taking classes. Ended up working full time at a series of weekly newspapers in Portage, and going to Valparaiso University part-time. So so it was kind of crazy because, here's the way, this is what they call a non-traditional student, right? I'm not there, during the day and all of this stuff. So I was getting the classes whenever it become available, I'd take it. And then when the prerequisite later became available, I'd take that. And so I had this crazy itch that I thought I had like one phys ed class, because I took an independent study phys ed class, and I took a golf class in the summer where you're banging golf balls at the VU stadium, football stadium, and hoping that nobody was actually working behind there, because we were terrible. But anyway, and the independent study was, running laps around what at the time was a fitness barn in South Haven. So I went to my friend Fred Striedelmeyer. He was in the registrar's office, and I said, Fred, I think I'm like one class away from graduating. Can you look it up for me? And so I'm sitting in his tiny office. It's a cubicle, and it's like, Kafka designed the office furniture, because you're sitting there. You got about maybe 2 inches between your knees and the desk, because you don't want to stretch your leg because you'll hear a loud thunk, and so I'm sitting there, and he's looking it up, and he says, oh, I got to talk to my boss, the registrar. And so I'm like, oh, great. So I'm sitting there for like 20 minutes. It seems like 20 hours. And he because you can't, play with your phone, because, your phone would have been, hello, connect me with, so-and-so. And so I'm sitting there. And he comes back, hands me a diploma, and says, congratulations, you just graduated. So that was, that was
awesome.
That was my commencement ceremony, no cap and gown for me, no walking down the aisle and so forth. It was kind of crazy. So yeah, so it was. So anyway, I told you I was working during this time. Well, I'm working at a newspaper in Portage, a weekly newspaper, and got laid off from that one. The first one, got hired by the publisher of the second one, who admired my work and all of that, and then had some issues trying to track him down to get a paycheck. He might be at the bar somewhere, so you kind of got to look for his car and say, hey, it's payday, you got to pay me. And so I showed up for work one day, and the IRS had a padlock on the door, so that was a bad sign.
Oh yeah.
And then had a third weekly newspaper I worked for, got fired because I missed work for being at the hospital during the miscarriage and all of this stuff. So went through all that craziness. Was a correspondent for what was the Vidat Messenger at the time. It was Valparaiso based. Yeah, sure, everybody remembers that. And so then I worked there. Got a job finally as a reporter. I think I wore down Carl Henricks finally asking him to hire me, and so he hired me for that job and started there. Was a police reporter for 6 months. So there were like 2 or 3 murders at the time. There was the young boy that got shot in the head by his dad, in the back of the head with a shotgun. It was custody dispute. So they arrested the dad at the funeral home during the visitation the night before the funeral. So yeah, it was crazy. And then there was Brenda Phillips, who was stabbed to death in Valpo. And so yeah, you probably remember that.
The apartment building, right?
Well, this she was living on up near the Presbyterian Church on Cherry something Street, Cherry something. I forget what it is.
Probably think of another case.
Yeah,
One off of Vale Park Road.
Right. That was later, and so I'm calling the neighbors of her neighbors to say, what did you know of her and all this. Well, one of them just hung up on me. I mean, how rude is this?
Really?
Well, and I found out later that she was the mother of the killer. And so, now it makes sense. I understand. And so that was a little crazy. And then covered education for a while, and then moved on to be a copy editor. Which it was like assistant city editor. So during this time, and I'm telling you long stories, but they're funny anyway. So thank you for your indulgence.
We're enjoying this.
So we had this intern, Kevin Murphy, who is now a state trooper, and he's very good at that. So anyway, Kevin, I assigned to go write a story about garage sales. You find all kinds of nutty things. It's a great story for a beginning writer. So I sent him out, and he comes back, and I'm reading the story, and as I'm reading it, he says, the funniest thing happened to me while I was at the one. He said, I went to the people and introduced myself as Kevin Murphy from the Vita Messenger, which is the thing you should do. You
Sure.
gotta have people know that, hey, I'm here as a writer. I'm going to interview you and write a story. So he introduces himself, and then he said, and then they asked for my parents' names, and he said, I'm a little weirded out by that, but he told them. He said, wait right here. And then about 5 minutes later, they come out of the house and hand them this framed certificate. And he said, it was my birth certificate. What happened?
Both parents?
Well, what happened was they bought this box of picture frames at a garage sale,
gosh.
and his birth certificate was in among the picture
Oh, my
frames.
goodness.
and so I said, Kevin,
That's weird
rewrite the
enough. I
story.
was just so like,
Yeah.
what if it was like his birth parents or something? He didn't know he was
So
adopted.
yeah, so he wrote it. It became a really good story.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I'm teasing him, saying, Kevin, that's like a title to a car. They own you now. Poor kid. And so what was funny was and what makes it very memorable was he was a security detail for Mitch Daniels during one of his visits when Mitch was governor, and so I see Kevin in the lobby at the Times after I'm done interviewing Mitch. I'm walking Mitch out, and he says, I don't know if you remember me. And I said, oh, of course I do. And then I tell that story to Mitch, who was like cracking up. And unfortunately, it was really embarrassing Kevin. But it was a great story.
It is a great story.
So you see all kinds of wacky things like that
My
happen.
goodness. Well, that's
So-
the life and time of a reporter you always run into, especially when you're out there.
You never
You've
know what
gotta-
you're going to run into.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. And another time, I'm kind of verging off your original question. Another time that was very memorable was during those Festival of the Lakes cruises that we had. I was on one side of they had like a large cabin dining area, so I'm on the one side with my wife, and Tom Philpott, I can't remember what office he was holding. Was he coroner or clerk then? In any case, he was on the other side, and apparently had been drinking, and starts, singles me out, points, this loud, whoa, and so then he starts cussing rather loudly and saying bad things about the Times and me, and I just sit there patiently listening, and I was with a couple of coworkers and stuff, and they're like, you're not reacting. I said, just it reflects badly on him, so just let him go, and I'm saying anything's not going to do anything except escalate it. So these are the funny things that happen sometimes. So anyway, you're asking about my path and what took me to the Times. 1988, I get a job with the Times, and so I had the experience of working in downtown Hammond and experiencing what it was like to work there in this building that was actually three buildings that were strung together, and so it was a really kind of a ramshackle building. You could feel the floor give, as you walked, and so. Well, yeah, and this was the old days. Everybody, the smokers didn't have to go outside. the one day, Rod Endich was a reporter, and she's on the phone, she's smoking, and so was her wastebasket, as it turns out. It was smoking. And so we're like trying to get her attention. She's waving us off, and there were three of us there. So one of us grabs the wastebasket, kind of frog march it down the stairs and dump the contents onto the sidewalk. And boom, these flames just as soon as the oxygen hits
Wow,
it,
yeah.
it just boom, the flames are like this high. And so Bob Daisy was a security guard. He gets the fire extinguisher and puts it out and all that stuff. Well, it wasn't until a long time later, actually, now that I think about it, we found out, Rada, what was the deal? Why wouldn't you, take care of your smoldering wastebasket? So she said, well, I was on the phone with a woman whose daughter had just been murdered. So, okay, you got to pass from that. But crazy things like that were happening. So
You need to write a book about all those.
I've been
That's
asked about
awesome,
that.
yeah.
Back
Yes.
in the day, particularly in the radio area, that because my dad was a Lake County politician, and so as a little kid, he took me in all the radio stations. He was a precinct committeeman that was in charge of
Sure.
taking all these state politicians in when they were in town to get into the radio station. As a kid, I was amazed by the technique that one can use by keeping a cigarette in their mouth while they're interviewing a politician. And I remember Tom Collins, specifically, we came in and the cigarette was going up and down, ashes were flying all over and I was amazed as a kid as how his notes didn't catch on fire.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Or why it didn't fall in his lap in the interview.
But I always wanted to get into radio as a kid because I was amazed by the dials. I was kind of ignoring what was actually going on. I just saw the dials and a guy in where they actually had to have an engineer in it,
Right.
and I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. And my mom's
That sounds like a Wizard of Oz type of thing.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
every
Pay
time
no
I'd come
attention to
home
that.
and I smelled like smoke for about a month. So
And his mom's like, no way.
yeah, but you remember those days. I mean, it's just everyone. And I'm sure in the newsrooms it was just like a cloud. Above it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, an actual smoke cloud as opposed to
Well,
typical
almost
cloud.
all offices.
Yeah.
I mean,
Back in
the
honestly,
day,
yeah, exactly. And it's not like the air here at the time was all that great.
No, that's when EPA was like non-existent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just for
Refineries and steel
not just for the
Right.
cars on the highway that it says, entering a congested area, type of thing. So it was pretty bad. But so I worked in this building and downtown Hammond at the time wasn't really, improving like it is now. There were really hardly any places to eat. You had to drive for a ways to get to like Arby's or someplace like that. Or you could walk to two holy places. There were St. Joseph's and St. Margaret's. St. Joseph's had the soup kitchen, and St. Margaret, the hospital, had the cafeteria. So we ended up visiting one of our coworkers, one of my bosses actually, who was hospitalized at the time. So we ate at the cafeteria. Why not? You're at the hospital. So we ate there, and the food actually was pretty decent. It's not like you get the special diets that you
Right.
do as a patient.
Not eating a lot
So
of Jell-O.
yeah, exactly. So we started going there every day, and after a while the prices went down, which I couldn't figure out until just recently. I thought, well, maybe they thought we were employees because we were there every day. I don't know.
That could be.
And so, but anyway, it was kind of funny. So then we went there to Munster when the Munster office opened. I missed the opening in the office because I'd been in this car wreck, and it was kind of a crazy one. I was on my way early morning, driving to work, and I was living out in Washington Township at the time, so Porter County, the eastern side of Porter County. So I'm driving along 400 North, and this car is coming up. I couldn't see it, but it came up the middle of the road on the hill. So of course, bam, we hit basically like that,
Oh.
and my hand hurts like heck because I got it caught between the steering wheel and the dashboard.
Oh, ow.
Found out later it had been broken, but I didn't know. And so I check on the other driver, not realizing at the time that both cars had been totaled, and then there was a farmhouse there, so I walk over to the farmhouse and ask to use the phone, call my wife to say, hey, call my office, tell them I'm going to be late to work. Well, 6 weeks late, as it turned out.
Yeah.
So I'm at the emergency room, waiting at the gurney and all this stuff, and they wheel the gurney over to the phone. They say, you got a phone call, and I'm like, who the heck's going to call me? Well, it was Brian Woodcock was the police reporter at the Times then, and he said, honestly, I didn't really want to talk to you. I just called to get your condition, and they had me talk to you. So I don't know, you'd have to talk to a doctor or something. Of course, I'm in shock, and so there was that craziness, and then this was when I was married to my first wife, Sarah. You remember, and she went to get something to drink, cup of coffee, whatever it was, and it was a long time before she came back. I said, well, where were you? She said, well, I tell you, the other driver was driving her boyfriend's brand new, it was like 5 days old, 7 days old, something like that. I want to say it was a Firebird, Trans Am. Well, it was a sports car, really expensive.
Car,
yeah. And her boyfriend's there with her, and he's really mad. And her husband's with her, and she's really mad too. So it's like, wow, I can see why you'd rather be.
That's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. So, my lame story was.
Man.
So anyway, so I missed, all of the transition to the new office because I was off with a hand that now has metal in it.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
But that must have been emotional for you too, just recently, because I saw your picture your last day there, which was kind of a different, going on to a different chapter of your life, and taking a picture of that building that really was kind of an icon for your career and what you've been through at that point.
Yeah, I worked in that office for a long time. In '95, the Vidette Messenger got acquired by the Times, and so I went back and worked in the Valparaiso office quite a bit. So I, told people I had dual citizenship. I had, I worked out of Porter County, worked out of Lake County, and then, now that I live in LaPorte County, I was in 3 counties every day, practically. So that's why in Pokemon Go, I'm Mr. Northwest Indiana or King of Northwest Indiana, depending on which account. And so yeah, I mean, I was there almost, within weeks of the start of the thing. And there were all kinds of crazy things that happened initially. There was a time that we got all new equipment to start with, and so a lot of crazy things were happening. The paper was getting out late because you're learning new skills and everything, and everything was new, and it was a non-smoking building, which kind of helped too.
Whoa,
but the one time we'd been late so many times that the publisher had issued an edict that we're not stopping until we're going to change the printing plates for a new zone. At that time we were zoning like 9-10 different ways, and so there was something that was really could have been libelous, and so the managing editor wanted it changed. He was there at night, and so the pressman said, nope, we got this thing, we're not going to change it. Yeah, but this is libelous, this is important, we got to change it. So I ended up threatening him with a fire extinguisher, and they stopped it and did the right thing and changed
Threaten him
it.
with a fire extinguisher?
Well, yeah, exactly. So this is like
Stop or I'll shoot.
I could write about 2 seasons hands of the office.
Is
Right?
this a news person's version of going postal?
Well, it didn't have a gun, So,
But I mean, yeah, but it's
and didn't actually, discharge the safety. It didn't pull the safety on the weapon, or the weapon on the safety, I guess in this case. And so he had that. There was another time where a salesman came in, an ink salesman, and brought pizza for the pressman, which was really nice.
Yeah.
Except they put one of the pizzas on the folder where the it comes out and it cuts and folds the paper, and so one of the pizzas, I'm not sure if multiple, but at least one of the pizzas got in and it gummed up the works.
Oh,
And
no.
so
Oh,
they got to take everything apart, all the machinery apart, and wipe the cheese and tomato sauce and all this stuff. Would you like pepperoni with your paper? And get that all cleaned up, and so the paper was still running the next morning when I got to the office.
Yeah, you're putting a vision in people's minds now. Every time their paper boy is late, what's actually happening? It could be pizza.
People are going to be
Pizza
like,
related.
let me smell my paper. Doesn't
Well,
smell like pizza today.
Or
Pepperoni.
it could be something different. I mean, when I was still at the Vidette Messenger was the time I yelled "Stop the presses," because it was the first of the space shuttles to blow up, and so
Oh, wow.
it happened
The
like
Challenger.
right as we were just starting the press. So we stopped, we replated. And did that. We stopped the press and replated when the Times was an afternoon paper when the tornado hit in Plainfield, Illinois, and so we stopped and then got the latest news out.
So
Then.
you always see that in the movies. Did that actually have you just run back into the printing room and say, stop the presses?
Absolutely.
So it's real.
It's
It's not a
real.
movie
It's
thing.
real. Yeah. I mean, you don't just send an email. You got to run up there, and you have to yell because everything is so loud. They have to wear hearing protection and all of this stuff. So that makes it a little harder to hear you. So you're like, doing gestures. Hey, I
Charades.
want to get your attention.
I was telling Kelly on the way here, my impression of the print media for the longest time was the movie His Girl Friday.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
And
It's a
so every
classic.
time I think about a newspaper, I think about all these guys on a phone right across from each other, all the, in the newsroom, they're from in City Hall, and all telling, it's like Chinese what do they call it?
Chinese telephone.
Chinese, yeah. And so how close is that? I mean, do you?
Well, that story, that movie was a remake of The Front Page, which was written by Ben Hecht. He was a Chicago newspaperman.
Oh, wow.
Who became a screenwriter and all this stuff, and author. And so, yeah, and then that got remade. A lot of that happened. You probably saw All the President's Men, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay, good. That's what really inspired me. The Watergate story is
sure.
what inspired me, because if you have a president who was Nixon at the time, who was such a crook, and despite his saying that he wasn't, and I don't care what kind of coat your wife wears, you could be a lousy president and do awful things. And so that's what got me into this, because I figured that somebody needs to be there to protect the public from bad things happening.
Right.
And in fact, you know what's happening in the newspaper industry. So many
One
of
the things we wanted to discuss.
Well, like in one decade, a quarter of the jobs, newsroom jobs, disappeared. I mean, just in 10 years. So you've seen horrible things happen. You've seen newspapers that have just stopped printing, and so the studies show that in those communities that don't have a newspaper anymore, that you're a whole lot more likely to see government corruption and things like that, because there's nobody to serve as the watchdog anymore.
Absolutely.
So it's important to have the journalists
Whistleblowers,
there.
yes.
And I always viewed it as you guys were the gateway to the truth, and you guarded the truth and always challenged the politicians and this day and age, it is getting to be more difficult in that there's purposeful manipulation of the truth, and then you see this parting of ways in the media where you have some extreme reporting going on that is following that false lead, and hence the president's, and I don't agree with it totally, but fake news. But what is your take on that? What do you see the media today as? I noticed you got an AP notebook there, which
Right.
I always look at them as the Bible. When everyone starts telling two different stories, I always go to the AP because they always seem to have like a rudder in the water. But give us your impression. What's going on today? Who should we trust and who shouldn't we?
Well, really,
Don't call out names, by the way.
yeah, I'm
Just
not,
in
yeah,
general.
No, let me set the stage for this. So here's what happened. To the media industry, and Ted Koppel's really good about saying this. He spoke at the Sinai Forum a few years ago about it. But what's happened is you've really had a media industry that's fractured. I mean, picture what it was like in the 1960s. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. Those were your only four networks. Now you've got umpteen zillion channels, and so everybody's attention is diverted because of that. You don't have the consolidation that you did back then to have all the people watching and seeing what's going on, and you don't have Walter Cronkite and people like that so much anymore. Yeah, exactly. Most trusted man in America
That's right.
at the time, and so what's happened, and then you've had the concern. Fox News was created, for example, because of the concern that there was so much pulling to the left, and so let's go the opposite direction to the right, and became a right wing propaganda organ and all this stuff to try to counter what they saw as NBC and some of them to the left. Yeah. Well, the problem is that you've got people pulled in either direction depending on what your viewpoint already was, and you're not hearing the other viewpoints so much. And so AP, for example, some of these are more toward the middle, but as certain populations pull to the right or pull to the left, then they get seen as not exactly in the middle where they really are.
Yeah.
And so.
I get a notification from their Twitter feed and so on, and they put out this every week. They put out at the end of the week a byline. Here's what didn't happen this week, and it's kind of interesting. They go down the line and all these false stories. They of course in their way they go back and actually do the research on what happened, and which. Yeah, I appreciate in a way, but you just wonder now, and you look at all these. Again, social media is probably to blame just as anything.
Anti-social media, in some cases.
Exactly, but you see people sharing news articles from something. The name
like Babylon Bee, for
Babylon.
example.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that this is satire or that this is something that Alex Jones or some wacko cooked up.
Alex Jones, yes.
Yeah. So I mean.
And then it's to the point where Onion is having a hard time coming up with satire now, because how do you in this day and age?
It's already pretty funny out there.
Yeah. It's like those poor guys. In fact, I remember one of the articles that they came out with recently is, so what do we do now? And that was it. It's like, what do we do? I mean,
we can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, you can't make it up.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if you remember when Saddam Hussein was still in power in Iraq. he had this information minister, Baghdad Bob was what he became known as, and really he was a disinformation minister because you could clearly see all these bombs going off and what was happening in the war, and he totally denying all of this. And it's like every now and then you see somebody who's in a similar role in the United States now, and you think oh, that's Baghdad Bob, reincarnated as so and so.
But one of the comical things I remember, and they are struggling, but one of the last things I remember just getting enjoyment out of when Trump was canceling the security clearance for several former aides or department heads. And The Onion came out with a piece, Trump locks himself out of the White House by canceling his own security clearance. So, listen, we do want to, these stories are great, but we do want to talk about your next step and one of the things that we've been huge fans of. And, we've always noticed you as being the artist of the word, and your blade of satire has always meant enjoyment to me. Oh my goodness, you are a word craftsman to the umpteenth degree. I'm going to miss that, whatever you do. But then I found out something. Become an even greater fan of your photography. Oh my goodness! For those of you who are his Facebook friends, you post that in several of your pieces. They just go out and your observations, and so are just wonderful. So why don't you share with us and some of the things that you're doing now?
Sure. So what I'm doing is, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth too.
I know, isn't that stunning?
And we'll put this on video.
Okay.
If you get us that piece, I guarantee I won't sell it or share it.
Sure. So what I'm doing is I'm using an iPhone 7 Plus. It's my
you're kidding.
standard. It is, and I'm using only free apps to be able to edit the photos because I want to do things that the average person, if they got the talent, frankly, but I don't want it to be something that they're priced out of. So hopefully this will inspire.
I want you to sell copies of that because I want that framed.
But so here's me not knowing this.
Seriously,
I imagine
it's
you with
gorgeous.
this 3-foot lens and all
Yeah,
these
you
gimbal stick and all this whole, and you're using an iPhone 7.
Right, 7
I
Plus.
am still
Yeah.
impressed. I'm still very.
So
Even
it
more
has two lenses. It has maybe you can see, but it's got the wide angle and a telephoto, and that's it.
Wow.
So I'm trying not to do a digital zoom. You can do that, but I'm trying to do that very rarely because then that affects the quality of the image and stuff. So there's some of the skills I learned in photojournalism that help. Although this is.
So we're seeing here now, that looks like a barn, right?
Yeah, well, I think basically it was a corn
barn.
crib.
No,
So here's this,
that's
and it'll it shows kind of this is a sunset, for
It's kind of
example.
picking it up a bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
And we'll
so
put it on.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so this is my
The
muse.
blues in that is gorgeous.
Yeah.
The different
And that,
shades.
okay, so that is, where's that at?
Michigan
In
City.
the Michigan
City, the
Yeah.
lighthouse. Yeah,
It's
you've
St.
taken
Joseph, Michigan.
several.
I believe looks similar to that.
And you've taken several of the lighthouse there in the winter and the spring, and I'm just fascinated.
Yes.
You are competing against some professional photographers. That's great.
This is my son's graduation earlier. I guess it was May 31st. Now that I think about it, and so this a couple of his friends and I thought, well, that was just a nice shot.
It is.
That's highly edited.
It's like a painting.
It does.
Well, there's this Prisma app that you can use, but I use Photoshop Express also to adjust the tones and all this, and this is not journalism here. This is art. But this was the beach. And I just happened to notice, look at the lines, they were just so nice. And so I decided to work on it. It took a little work, processed it several times to
Look
get
at
it.
the colors. They popped.
That's the courthouse in Porter County. That's on Lake Michigan. That was in Michigan City. I was standing on the
Gorgeous.
pier there.
Now, do you put these in hard print form?
I don't typically.
you need to.
I've thought about it. I've been asked to, and this
Oh,
is
wow,
a
that is
humorous one.
interesting.
Looks
The
like
talking
it's saying
silo,
something.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
uh-huh.
If silos could talk.
Oh boy, would they tell stories! And so
They'd
you
probably be corny.
well, unfortunately
You know.
the picture isn't grainy,
She is hilarious.
I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like thinking he's probably
That's
cussing out a
really
driver.
cool.
Yeah.
But there's that. There's this one kind of had an Edgar Allan Poe.
I was just going to
Yeah.
say Edgar Allan Poe and the Raven.
Wow.
I like flowers. I like really
too.
tight shots. So I'll do a lot of that. This is at Rogers Lakewood Park.
Oh, wow. I
and-
would never have guessed.
And I figured I'd include another edit of the same
They're
image
so gorgeous.
so that you can kind of see. That's the federal building in Chicago. I walked past that one night on my way home from a dinner at the Union League Club and awards dinner. And so I did that. That was May, I guess. That's at Valparaiso University.
gonna say that's a chapel.
If you're in the balcony, you can see, especially late in the day, you can see the light coming in through the stained glass, but it's also reflecting onto the floor.
Yeah.
And so it's a really nice place to be. It's like behind the organ.
And that's what I've noted. You've got several beautiful shots of the Chapel of the Resurrection.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Sunset Hill Farm. I thought it, made it look very Kansas tornado-esque.
Yeah.
That is Kankakee River, down near the confluence with the Yellow River.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically on the edge of LaPorte County down there. That's a First Christian Church in Valpo. It was
Still light.
just, I liked the way the stained glass
Oh,
caught
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
in the
Oh, man. Nice
Northern
sunset
Michigan.
behind the
Yeah. It's my
lighthouse.
favorite place to be at sunset.
Yeah. That's the one of them. You took several pictures of the ice hanging up. Yeah, that's it. That's awesome.
So yeah, and this is an edited version of it. But
One has to question how you got out there without slipping into the lake.
I was very careful.
Yeah, obviously.
And if I'm walking out there and it's really icy, I am by this wall rather than near the edge of the water, and I'm keeping my hand or glove really. Let's be honest, and I think it was extremely cold this day, as I remember, and so I had to take my hand out of the glove occasionally to shoot the photo, and it really got cold. So I learned that you can use the volume control on your phone as the shutter.
Oh, really?
And so so it might tilt it a little bit. You got to hold it fairly steady.
Right.
But yeah, it really helps. This is an old
Cool.
old outhouse or shed, or I think it's an
I
outhouse.
think Kelly's
along
going to
the
want a couple of these
Kankakee.
Oh,
prints.
yeah, I definitely want a couple
Oh,
of them.
wow.
So
Turning
NIPSCO,
the other way from the lighthouse.
Michigan City Generating
Yeah.
Station, yeah.
And
And
even that looks gorgeous in your photos.
this is a common thing I'm going to have to watch for, is see that
the sunset
flare from the
thing,
lens.
yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed one of the good photographers. I'm a good amateur, but he's a professional. I
Now, I
noticed
notice
that
you
on
don't
one
have
of
any
those.
of the Lake County building or the courthouse. Is that usually because the politicians are waving to you in fashion it's unacceptable?
Well, did you notice? Are you talking about the new one?
Yeah.
Did you notice that's built as a flow chart? Because when you think about it, you serve in the one building, and then you're adjudicated in the next, and then you spend time in the third afterwards. So.
That's funny.
So, yeah, I'm kidding, but
No,
it's
that's great.
sort of. This was at Indiana Dunes, now National Park,
That's right.
at Mount
Woo!
Baldy. So, I just love that shot. And then this
How cool.
powerful waves, and that's medieval times.
I was
just
just
like
gonna
that.
say.
And that's really not an edited shot. That's just the candid.
How
Well, in the
fun.
interest of time, we can, if you can get
Yeah.
those to us, we'll put them
I'll
up.
do that, but I
The ones
want
you
to show
Go
you
ahead.
one more as I'm quickly flipping through. Some of these I printed on metal, and
Wow.
and that really, and I just got it at Walgreens. But some of those, it really makes the colors pop on metal. There was one, since that's at the
stunning.
Basilica at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That's at Wicker Park.
I love
and
that.
and since you
Wow.
mentioned
Beautiful.
The Lake
the
County
course,
the old
yeah,
courthouse.
the old courthouse.
I
it was
noticed
just
no
so
one's
nice.
waving to you there.
Yeah, exactly.
Just some
And
ghosts.
certainly not with only one of their fingers. So, but yeah, there's some nice,
Oh, they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
nice shots.
Oh gosh, we're going
So-
to have to start wrapping up here pretty soon. We're going to run out of memory space
Sure.
on the gang, but this has been absolutely
Oh,
wonderful.
phenomenal.
Is there any parting words you want to leave us with? Like, how's it going? Next direction in your life?
Well,
And-
I brought you mentioned the AP book. Here's basically where I am.
But you know what's great about blank? You can make it anything you want.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, here's the thing. I've been in the position. You mentioned I was editorial page editor for 12 years, and so I was helping with a lot of things. We're at the Indiana Welcome Center on Kennedy, actually Corinne Drive, but just off Kennedy in Hammond. This was how I've kind of affected the region. Bill Wellman read a column I wrote saying, Mark Kiesling, I talked him into writing this piece on the anniversary of the movie A Christmas Story.
Yes.
And, we did a great thing about how Gene Shepard grew up in Hammond, and the story was set here, and all they filmed partly in Cleveland, but the story was set here, and all of this. And I said, wouldn't it be a great idea for the Convention and Visitors Bureau to capitalize on this and whether it's a festival or what, turn it into, a way to tell a story of Northwest Indiana and,
So we have you to
and
thank
make
for
some
that
money.
here
So
every
so
Christmas.
so Bill Wellman heard read that
Yeah.
and called me and said, that's a great idea. So he ended up helping get the a statue out front, as well as
Yeah.
some of these things.
Flip with his tongue stuck
Neat.
to the pole.
Yeah, exactly.
because that is
exactly.
entertainment,
So-
just to bring back, because that's
Yes.
specifically around this area. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
I
it's
mean,
known
I've,
worldwide, so
so
yeah.
I've been involved in these things. I'm an idea generator. So I'm looking for some way I can make a positive impact on the region, and improve the quality of life here. So what's my parting wisdom for other people is basically you've got what it takes to make a difference in your community. Now, whether that's volunteering with your church, with the Chamber of Commerce, with Little League Club, whatever, wherever your talents are, find them, put them to use, and do some good. Even if it's just going and visiting the old folks and making sure they're okay.
Put a smile on
and they have
somebody's face.
exactly. Even just smile at people, hold the
Yes.
door open for somebody as they're walking into a store or wherever. You can make a difference.
That's right. Be the change you want to see.
And by golly, let's do it together.
yes,
Oh, that's
I
beautiful.
agree. Yeah, I tell you, there's so much negativity in the world. People need more positive influence, and and there's a lot going on. We have people on our show that are making huge differences. The food bank, the
Right.
Girls on the Run, who are mentoring girls in the middle school age, and so much tremendous work being done out there. But yeah, there needs to be more. There does.
Always.
And well, Doug, I can't tell you, appreciate you coming on
my
and
gosh,
sharing
yes.
this. Oh boy, I've got to say I've enjoyed your craft and your words
Thank you.
from afar. But
Thank
yeah,
you for
it's
sharing
been a
them
big
here with our
fan.
whole audience.
And we will continue being fans of your artwork. So we're
Absolutely.
looking
Well, thanks.
forward to putting those up on our video.
And I want to have you on next time when you are here to promote your book about all these great stories you have, because I want to read it.
Definitely.
I got some work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get the old typewriter out, right?
right.
You know, honestly, I bought a used MacBook Pro from my
there you
son's
go.
school. They were getting rid of them, and so it's like he calls one day and says, "Dad, can I get this laptop? It's $50." And it had like a cracked screen, but it wasn't a bad thing. And I said, $50? How many of them do they have? so I bought 3 of them that day. I just
great.
happened to have the cash and ran down and got 3. So I've got one. It's got like the enter key it's missing, but hey, I can
They
attach a
got
keyboard
started
and I'm good.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
Look for your new book to be written on
Absolutely. I expect it to
old
be
Mac
that.
Pro from a
That's
school. Well, with that, we do have to close out. Man, we do appreciate you coming on, and I thought this would be an appropriate place to conduct this interview, the Visitors Center here in Hammond, and because
not
this-
knowing the story
I
behind
know.
it.
and it makes it
No,
even
not
better.
knowing at all. Now you've given it more relevancy, so appreciate that. And boy, we wish you the best in whatever you do, and
Look forward to watching.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
Seeing
you.
what's coming.
our camera and microphone is always open to you. So anytime you want to come on and tell a story, just let us know.
And thanks
appreciate
also
that.
to the Welcome Center here for allowing
Oh,
us to come
absolutely.
in
They're
here
great.
and do this.
Thank
They're
you
wonderful.
very much
If
for
you
allowing-
haven't been out here, come out here. There's a great gift shop. There's so many cool events and things to see. Show
Oh,
up.
yeah, absolutely.
With that, we'll say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hi.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Ray's Movers and Self-Storage, offering storage solutions and all your moving needs. The Green Witch Juice Bar and Cafe for delicious, natural foods, smoothies, and juices.